Sarah, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
It is so great to reconnect. I recently read your book, As a Jew, Reclaiming Our Story from Those Who Blame, Shame, and Try to Erase Us. What a bold title.
Yep, this time around I was not playing.
You're not messing around. You are not
No. No.
messing around. What do you know, early on in the book, you come up, you say, or pretty early on, you say, by talking about what Judaism is and contrasting it a little bit with the history of Christianity and other places it's evolved and things like this. You say that you didn't know what a Jew was.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating thing to say in a book for someone who was born a Jew, who lived their life as a Jew, albeit not a super observant one all the time. But to say that as I got into the weeds here and was looking at the history of Judaism, that it's not quite a religion, it's not quite an ethnicity. You're scratching your head and you're saying, "What the hell's a Jew?" I mean, how do you figure this out? Now, you get closer to thinking about it. What have you learned? Tell us. I mean,
Yeah.
you sketch it out in the book. I mean, how this is a pretty powerful question. I mean,
Yeah.
how did writing the book help you answer the question?
Sure. I think many Jews in America and many Americans in general think of Judaism as a Protestant style religion. It's like there's Christianity and then they have a church and there's Judaism and it has a synagogue and they each have holidays you know, Judaism does have Jews do have a religion associated with us, but a Jew can reject every single aspect of Jewish religion. I can totally reject Jewish religion, say I think it's all nonsense, say I don't believe in God. I'm still a Jew. Okay. So it's not just a religion, right? There's something more there, but it's certainly not a race or just an ethnicity. There are Jews of all races, of all ethnicities. Jews are actually quite diverse. So wait a second. What are we? Well, we're a category that predates the modern categories of race, ethnicity, and religion. We are whatever the Ammonites and the Hittites and the Edomites were in the Bible. That's what we are. But they're all gone, and we're still here. So again, what are we? We are a nation, a tribe, a civilization, a peoplehood, a family really is what we are. And that is different from being a religion. There certainly are Jews who are very engaged in Jewish religion, Jews who really aren't. They're both equally Jews. And that I think is very confusing for a lot of people because it doesn't match the modern categories by which we identify ourselves.
Yeah, how is that a modern story? I mean, that's interesting because I think imagine both in ancient Israel and with the Jebusites, all those people you named, you read about in the Hebrew Bible, those wouldn't have been really separate categories, right? For many pre-modern people, your ethnicity, where you lived,
Right. Exactly.
the metaphysical beliefs you might have about the divine or demons or sprites, the rituals, all these, you wouldn't have been able to parse all that out, right? But part of being
Exactly.
in the modern world is parsing all that out. How does that work
Yeah.
out for you as a modern Jew?
I mean, I think it is challenging, right? And I think it's confusing to a lot of people around us. Once it's like, okay, well, why do you care so much about Jews in Israel? All you share with them is a religion, one might think. But that's not true. They are part of my peoplehood, my family. Half of my people live in Israel. So, you know, I think it would be very weird to suggest to a very progressive mainline Protestant in Berkeley, California, that she really needs to care about a Pentecostal in Brazil. Like, I think that would seem a little weird to her. Like, what, just because we're both Christians? Like, ew. Like, what we just, that just doesn't, that seems kind of odd as a category. But, to say that I care about a Jew in Israel is like to say that I care about my brother or my cousin. There is kind of a family kind of relationship. And I think that that can be confusing for people who don't really understand what it is to be a Jew.
And it's an interesting metaphor too, right? Because it doesn't necessitate agreement or even being able to stand each other some of the time, right? I mean,
That's correct.
you can
That
have
is
a very
correct. Neither
intimate
of which we have.
right,
Yes.
right? You can have family folks that you just dread seeing, and yet
Yeah.
you
And yet
feel
they're your
emotionally
family.
connected to them, right? They're no less family when they drive you insane at Thanksgiving, right?
This is exact it's part they're part of your family, and there's the category of ideology in which I would put religion, and then there's a category of family, which can and oftentimes has to encompass a broad range of ideologies. You're right, like, So I always say, like, Uncle Bernie gets to come to the Seder, even though we think some of his beliefs are really important. And we're going to just yell at Uncle Bernie and we're going to fight with him, but we don't kick him out of the Seder because of who we voted for.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I think that's an interesting thing because figuring out I mean, I think that is something that you explain in the book that I think people but, you have to sort of live, right, with this religious category. I mean, you write in the story about your experience as a hospital chaplain, right? That
Mhm.
you're in COVID and you're in this and yet you're dealing with an overwhelmingly Christian group of instructors and peers. I mean, I think there was one Muslim in your group, but having to deal with you just almost have to seed the ground, right, and work with this religious category, even though it doesn't sort of fit.
Right.
Can
Right.
you
No, and look, I mean, Jews do have a religion that is affiliated with them. That's undeniable. It's just that that religion is not the subtotal of Jewish identity. We are a peoplehood with a religion, and members of this people have a different relationship to this religion, have a very diverse relationship to the religion. And I will say, growing up in a largely Christian country and culture, and I think what I'm about to say will feel very resonant to people of many different minority, non-Christian identities. I grew up really soaked in Christianity, even the way I think, the language I use, the concepts I embrace, they're very much Christian concepts. So I always thought that spirituality is our bodies are carnal and material and kind of a little bit gross, like kind of degraded, whereas there is a spiritual realm that is incorporeal and immaterial and really quite superior. And the goal is to transcend this kind of degraded body for that heavenly spiritual realm. That is an idea that I think is central in many ways in Christianity. That is not a central Jewish idea. That is not the Jewish idea of spirituality. So even the way, my Christian patients would often read the New Testament, they'd request a Bible and they would just open it up and read it. And they would tell me, like, this is very moving to me. This is comforting. I find my faith when I read this text. Whereas, like, if you read the Torah, which is the first 5 books of what Christians call the Old Testament, what Jews call the Tanakh, it doesn't quite work that way, right? It's a very old text. Some of it is very weird, but we spent 2,500 years debating, interpreting, arguing about it. We don't kind of just sit down and read it for comfort or for connection. Like, you read it with commentaries, you read it together as a community. You kind of debate it and wrestle with it. It's kind of a different kind of approach. And I just realized, like, even the idea of prayer, which is always a certain kind of like this kind of like out loud, spontaneous, like, I'm praying for my friend Scott, God, please heal him. That's beautiful. You just don't meet a lot of Jews who pray that way. And when I was told in chaplaincy, no, 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 that is a universal form of prayer. As long as you don't say Jesus, that is universal. You pray like that for any patient. I was like, not necessarily. And my Muslim classmate too was like, no, I'm not really sure about that. Right. Like, but again, I think because it's the majority religion in America, it's often thought of as being universal. And so all of these keys that I had, these ideas around prayer and spirituality and engaging with text, they were really Christian keys. And I kept thinking that you can use those to unlock any tradition, but you really that's not necessarily true. Each tradition has its own keys.
Yeah, I wonder how much of those 2 are so American, right? In that and because there's so much influence in America, evangelicalism is so influential in America, right? And such a personalistic because I mean, I don't imagine many Christians in Europe would say, "Hey, I have a personal
Yeah. But
relationship with you,"
Christianity is
or
so
yeah,
diverse, right? Like,
yeah,
you can't say Christianity is this, right? Even the way I'm talking about it, it's like these are, these are sort of Christian ideas that have become popular or that have sort of risen to the popular consciousness. But not all Christians believe this stuff either, right? It's an incredibly diverse tradition. It's just what has captured the national conversation, right? What images have sort of like become most common and popular, and like even within Christianity, many Christians have very diverse beliefs. So you got to be really careful about saying, I should be more careful about saying, oh, that's a Christian idea. Well, a lot of nuances there.
but this American thing about faith having to be personal and being able to talk about it. I mean, you talk about I mean, you worked in the White House, you worked with President Obama and his wife, Michelle Obama. We may I remember when President Obama gave this interview to Christianity Today and talked about this personal relationship with Jesus and his belief in substitutionary atonement and all this stuff that my British friends said we just wouldn't care about the prime minister. We would have
Yeah.
no interest, but this we do this of all of our presidential candidates, right?
Yes.
They have to talk
Absolutely.
in this not just Christian frame, but personal. They have to.
Yes.
They can't just say my faith is something, internal that I maybe go to mass. I
Right.
mean, they even God forbid they even make Trump talk about it, which is so hilarious when he goes,
I
which
know.
part of the Bible do you like? I think like 50-50. I mean, you listen to him, it's just like he wouldn't know anything religious at all. But we
You're
put them
right.
through these awkward exercises, right?
You do. You're right.
What
It
is it
is.
about American life that we
Such a good
want this
question,
personal
right?
piety, right?
Yeah, it is some there. I mean, look, we're a pretty religious country,
Yeah.
overall. And I do think that's something that people kind of, I don't know, maybe they're looking for it as a proxy for morality, for decency, for do you get me? Are you like me? You're right, it is very odd the way that we kind of demand it as a public thing, even though we ostensibly have a separation of church and state. It is very interesting.
Yeah, it's church and state, but not church and politics, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
in fact, we almost require this
Yeah.
fusion of religion and politics, and if I remember when Bernie Sanders, is Jew, who's not obviously
Oh,
not super observant
right.
in traditional ways, but just he had to come out and say he was an agnostic. I mean, even he had to do you just have to do this thing, right?
You've
Where
gotta publicly declare.
you
Right,
have to
right.
right, which is so fascinating.
It is fascinating.
You used this term a minute ago, these Christian keys, and you talked about needing to sort of unlock spiritual meaning for yourself to finding Jewish keys like
Oh,
covenant and
yeah.
commandment and holiness. Can you talk a little bit about Jewish keys? But what is it? How do you switch keys? How does it work with the different
Oh,
locks? Like how does
yeah.
that journey play out
Sure.
in your life?
So, I think, you just mentioned actually what I think of as core Jewish keys. One of them is Brit, which in Hebrew means it's like covenant. It's like, in our holy text, we are told that God and the Israelites, the ancestors of the Jews, they made an agreement together at Mount Sinai. And there was really, God offered them a covenant. He said, like, listen, I'm going to offer you a covenant, which is a kind of a contract that asked them to meet a lot of obligations and responsibilities about how they treat each other, how they run their society, how they engage with God. And the Israelites, they had to decide whether they wanted to accept it. And it was like all the Israelites were there. It was not just a senior group of people. It wasn't just very, elite priests. It was everyone there, and they decided to accept it. And that was really kind of a partnership agreement between God and human beings to create a certain kind of society and live a certain kind of way. And in that agreement were what are known as mitzvot, commandments. Like these are the basic, laws of Judaism about, how you treat other people, how you treat your body, what you eat, how you conduct your business affairs. A pretty extensive series of laws. And, there's an idea of B'Tselem Elohim, this idea that everyone is created in the divine image, which is such a radical idea. I mean, Scott, if you really believe that idea, and if I really believe that idea, our entire lives would be totally shaken up. Like,
And
we would never.
this belief is hammered out, right, in sort of Babylonian context where it was very clear that now only the kings and the priests are made in the divine.
Exactly.
That's why they mediate this relationship, right? And you have the whole
Yes.
Marduk and Tiamat, and you have this really
Oh, yeah.
violent creation story that it's very interesting because these creation stories are sort of like, hey, we're not that, right?
It is.
That's
The
not who we are.
The Torah is a polemic against the ancient societies around it, right? This idea that every human being is created in the divine image, like exactly as you said. No, no, no. The Pharaoh was God or was sort of in God's image, and like these slaves, no, 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 they're not created in God's image. But this is the Torah saying, no, 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 everyone, not just Jews or Israelites, by the way. Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah, none of those folks were Jews, right? They came before Abraham and the Jews. It's very clear all people are created in God's image. And then you have this idea of, Abraham is this particular person, and God says to him, like, look, I'm going to have a particular relationship with you and your descendants, in addition to having relationships with other people and their descendants, including Ishmael. This is also another Jewish key, which is holding both universalism and particularism. There's the universalism of like every single human being is created in God's image and needs to be treated as such. The particularism of we as Jews, we relate to God in a certain way, which like I don't care if anyone else does something differently. That's fine. That's really none of my business. Like I have this relationship with God. If you'd like to join it through conversion, please do. But I'm not going to try to impose my way on anyone else. There isn't one right way to exist, to be saved, to be in relationship with God. We have our way. We expect that others have theirs. And all of those others are created in the divine image. So there is that universalism of every person being beloved to God and the particularism of we are going to engage with God in this way and others will engage in their ways.
You you talk about in the book how basically this anti-empire, and you say like basically part of what Judaism's raison d'être, right? The part of the brand is make a society that isn't Egypt's.
Like the exact opposite of Egypt. They're like, like the tower, Egypt and Mesopotamia, like look at the Tower of Babel. What were they talking about? Like Babylon, these big, these massive towers that these rulers would build in their honor, and God is like, no, 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 knocking that down. Right? This is sort of it's a lot of ancient trolling of the societies around them. It's quite funny that way, actually.
Wouldn't you love to see Donald Trump like in that story? Like, we're making like a big, beautiful tower. This tower is so fantastic. You like going to the heavens. It's gonna be so branded. It's the really the big. I mean, people are saying it's the best tower. That's what they're all about.
He's a big character, man. He's a big old character. That
Oh,
is true.
he's when you say when you write that Judaism's brand is sort of anti-Egypt. I mean, how is it to be a Jew working through all this in a country that looks pretty Egyptian, right? I mean,
Yeah,
we're pretty imperial, right? We're pretty powerful,
yeah.
big agricultural. We're certainly not we're not nomadic, right? We're pretty fixed. We don't always treat the stranger or the alien very well. I mean, aren't we kind of a little Egyptian, a little Egyptish?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, we're seeing a lot of that right now, right? Like where it's like, Jewish tradition is particularly concerned with the treatment of the widow, the orphan, the poor, and what's known as the stranger, which is in essence the immigrant. It's the non kin group, it's the non in group. It is this person who's a foreigner, and these are people who right now in our society are really being terribly treated. They're suffering. That is Egypt, right? Like that is very much Egypt. And you're right. There's a lot of and by the way, I think a lot of what's going on flies in the face of Christian values and Muslim values and Hindu, all I think the world's great traditions have some variation of it. It's different, right? They're all very unique, but I have a feeling that probably all of them have some harsh words to say about what's going on right now.
When I was reading your stuff about anti-Egypt in the book, I often think of this weird text in Genesis 46, verses 33 and 34. Joseph's brothers, Joseph sort of saved the world at the time through his brilliant sort of management of Egyptian
Right.
grain and stuff. This is my favorite Parsha cycle, right? I love that Joseph stuff. I think it's so interesting. But
Right.
Joseph and the brothers and they're coming in the land. Jacob's coming in the land and stuff, and they're telling him where they can settle. And Pharaoh says, "Your servants have been breeders of livestock from the start until now." I'm sorry, they're saying this to the pharaohs, I guess. Your servants have been breeders of livestock from the start until now, both we and our fathers, so that you may stay. Or I think Pharaoh's saying that, quoting that back to them. And he says, so that you may stay in the region of Goshen. And then the Pharaoh says, for all shepherds are abhorrent to Egyptians. I think about that text
That's
all
really profound,
right.
actually.
And right,
Yeah.
like, and so is this sort of ancient anti-Semitism? And I wonder, is the anti-Semitism rooted in there's nothing less imperial than shepherds,
Yeah.
right? I mean, then you sort of follow up. God can sort of say, go there, you can go there. You don't grow, you can't farm, right? I mean, to be an
Yeah.
empire, you got to be a farmer. You can't run around and have an empire, right? You
Yeah.
have to have these cultivating cultural skills, which are like the antithesis. I mean, do you think there's something to the spirituality of the shepherd, like the people that are open to wandering, that makes them anti-imperial?
I think there is something there. And I think that is actually true throughout history. You see Jews kind of refusing to bow to the whims of those around them, refusing to kind of blend in, refusing to erase their difference in order to fit in with the majority, what is powerful. There's a sort of counterculturalness to being a Jew that enrages people around them. And just so you know, this philosopher named Bernard Harrison, who I love, he talks about these like it's something to the effect of these like much more powerful yet still insecure surrounding cultures who just cannot bear this minority that will not conform to them. It's
Yeah.
just abhorrent to them. And I
And
think
yet
you
they have
see,
kinship, right? This
yeah,
they have the chosenness, right? Rosenzweig talks about this, like that these election, just damn it, these people have peoplehood without what you need. They don't have the nation, they don't have the trappings of bread, yet they have togetherness.
yeah, that way of togetherness. And I think, it's easy to think that anti-Semitism is kind of a mystery. It's like eternal. It's just baked into the world order. Where did it come from? Who knows? It's mystical. No, it's
The
not.
Jews, Sarah comes from the Jews.
Except right, exactly. I mean, like, this is the thing that's such a not. It's like, look, you have pre-Christian pagan anti-Semitism, which is sort of like xenophobia. Like these people are not going to be like, we have a real problem with this because it's sort of insulting to us, the majority. It's like it's irritating, it's disrespectful. But then Christianity really theologizes this idea. Yeah, the New Testament is a bunch of Jews fighting with each other.
Yeah.
All Jews, right? They part ways. Some Jews stay Christian, stay Jewish.
You make a great point when you're reading, which I love. You said, yeah, you were like, I got to read the New Testament. You're a chaplain, I think, at the time, and you have this friend, you do this study, but you made this great point. I think you're quoting a scholar, but that a lot of the language that the Jews writing the New Testament use towards Jews that aren't part of their movement are language that you'd find with other Jews talking about it, because you have these Judaisms in Second Temple Judaism, and a
Yeah.
lot of them think all the other ones are wrong, right?
Oh
And you
yeah.
so you
It's
just
just there's these
castigate what,
sects
yeah,
just like fighting with each other, right? These Jewish sects fighting. And eventually there are two left and they go their separate ways, right? One stays Jews, the others become Christians. And a lot of many of the leaders of early Christianity sought to define Christianity against Judaism. And they
yeah.
really did it with some extremely negative tropes about Jews being diabolically powerful and disgustingly depraved and in a conspiracy, so much so that they killed Jesus. They convinced their Roman overlords to kill Jesus, which historically seems bonkers to me, but who am I to say? And you just see those themes and tropes making their way through the Western world for many, many centuries. Islam had its own anti-Jewish ideas, but Christianity kind of made its way to the Muslim world and really amped those out. And then you see the Soviets having their own ideas about Jews that are expressed in those same tropes of power, depravity, conspiracy. None of this is a mystery. Right? These ideas about Jews, you can trace them back to their beginnings. And so, look, these are human created ideas. There's nothing like inherent in the order of the universe that says people need to be anti-Semitic.
You also talking about a little bit more about the keys. You had a line I loved in the book that you said that it's not a belief line or a bloodline, but a text line that keeps this together. It's this story
Yeah.
that comes out of a textual tradition, not just the Bible, but Talmudic tradition, commentary tradition. That's beautiful. Do you think that's like, I say this as kind of a nerdy type that likes books.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the nerd lens in you, or do you think, because I mean, like, what do you do if you're one of these people that you want to have religious meaning, but you just are not that intellectual, right? I mean, is that
Yeah.
alienating the text line stuff? I mean, how do you, what if you're not a reader?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is actually Amos Oz and Fania Al-Salzberger. They're Israeli writers who wrote a book called Jews and Words, where they say ours is not a bloodline, but a text line, right? Like, the we are a peoplehood, right? That's one thing, but we have this text line. We have these series of texts that we've carried with us, that we've debated and interpreted and continued to build for so many years. It belongs to all of us, right? We can all return to that text line. It is ours. Now, look, what if you're someone who just doesn't? I don't like reading. It's not your jam. Texts are not your jam. Well, you're still a Jew. Let me be
Right,
clear.
right, right,
Whether you
right.
ever read a book or don't read a book, you're still a Jew. I would like, doesn't matter. That's the peoplehood. That's the family. You're in the family. And if you want to engage with Jewish religion, you got to do some reading. I don't know what to tell you otherwise. Or listening. If you're someone who learns by listening or hands-on experiences, you need to engage with the substance of the tradition. It's not just Jewish tradition is not based in like faith and kind of like strengthening your faith and believing things. It's really there's a whole doing. There are rituals, there are traditions, there is just centuries and centuries and centuries of Jewish thought. So, look, if you engage with none of that, you're still a Jew. Sorry, nothing that doesn't change a thing. But I think to engage with Jewish religion and tradition, you do actually have to engage with the content. And that can be done in a lot of ways, by the way. It doesn't have to be reading, it can be listening. People listen to lectures. They go to synagogues and actually participate in prayer service. There are different ways to experience this content, not just like sitting alone and reading.
It's so interesting. I'm picturing this person you're describing that maybe they're not that textual, but they don't want to do any experiential stuff, and they don't want to do any of it, but they're born a Jew. Is that like the person that's sitting on land where there's oil under it, right? And they never dig for it, or
I think,
like
yeah, it
there's
kind of
buried
is.
treasure. There's like buried treasure in
Yeah,
their backyard. That's still there, right? The treasure's no less in their
course.
yard,
Oh yeah, it's still there.
but
Like it's still
but
and it's still
they just
theirs.
but they got to dig it up.
You got that's I think that's such a beautiful metaphor, right? That oil is theirs.
So
You take it
this
away
is
from
the
them.
next book. This is the next book. You gotta dig it up. You can quote me in the acknowledgments, right? You got this
Do
beautiful
it.
net.
I mean, look, I always say there are millions of ways to be a proud, passionate, committed, great Jew. Millions. There's so many ways to do that. But I will put it out there that I think that one way that's actually not a great way to be Jew is to be contentless, is to know absolutely nothing. Because when you have that big, empty void kind of Jewish identity, which frankly I had for most of my life, it wasn't until my mid 30s that I started engaging with the text and the tradition. When you have that empty void Jewish identity that's like, ha ha, Seinfeld, bagels, I'm anxious, ha ha, it's going to get filled by whatever story Jews or people are telling about Jews around you. And look in the 80s and 90s where I grew up, people were saying pretty nice things about Jews. That was okay. Right? I could get away with that contentless, empty, void Jewish identity. Today, you really can't.
But
Today,
is
peop
it's interesting though, because you're a person that you're somebody that is a substantive person, right? That is an intelligent person, a White House speech
Ooh,
writer, an academic, and yet you'd have this Judaism that's
that was so
relatively
stupid.
right. Okay, so my friend Rabbi Uri Allen, he's a good friend of mine. He says he has this great term. Calls it pediatric faith. He said, it was
Hmm.
very interesting. You have these people in shul that are very, and you've had them in churches. My interest, you have them in churches too,
Sure.
that are maybe doctors or lawyers, or they're sophisticated in their artistic taste and everything, and yet their own connection to, say, Judaism is pediatric, right? It's not as developed as the rest of the parts of their lives.
This is the thing, like so many Jews, we have this terrible system where you stop learning when you turn 12 or 13 and have your bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, and then you go to college and you're like, oh my gosh, Western philosophy, Eastern religion, this stuff is so sophisticated. Judaism, it's so childish, right? Because you stopped learning when you were 12. If someone said to you, Scott, I feel like I'm a pretty learned person. I mean, I stopped learning about history when I was 12. And so I now know that, the Civil War was caused by states' rights. It's like, yeah, honey, states' rights for what? Right? Like you don't if you have this sort of childish understanding of history or politics or anything, if you stop learning anything at age 11 or 12, that would be embarrassing for most Jews. That would be like they would be kind of embarrassed about that, but they're often quite proud that they know nothing about Judaism. But the thing is, Scott, a lot of Jews don't, I mean, this includes me 12 years ago, they don't think there's anything to know, right? Because 250 years ago, as we tried to fit into the modern world in Western Europe, we essentially transformed Judaism into a Protestant style of religion. We essentially kind of diminished these 2,500 years of post-biblical texts and debates and traditions. And we're like, okay, they have a church, we have a Jew church. They have 4 holidays, we have 4 holidays. We kind of jammed this Protestant cookie cutter
By
into
the way, could
Judaism
you
and
just
got
say
rid of the substance.
that's a great term, Jew church. Like
Jew church. It's
and
a,
look,
we are a Jew
we got
church.
a little Jew church over there.
Hey man,
Like
it had organs, it had pews. I mean, it was like, listen, it's stained glass. We really did not play. Like we had our Jew church, but like we got rid of the 2,500 years of post-biblical texts, which have our wisdom, our countercultural, radical, profound, transformational wisdom. So honestly, most Jews don't even know there's anything to know. They know 4 holidays and, a handful of universalistic values that every decent person believes in. They don't know that those thousands of years of wisdom about the human condition. And so it's not actually surprising that many of us are pediatric Jews, including me 12 years ago. I had to grow up. It took some time, it took some effort.
Well, you're coming along quite nicely. I'd say that the maturation process is fantastic. I want to say you're
I
really,
still feel like a beginner though. I gotta tell you, I've written 2 books. I've read hundreds of books, taken classes. I'm gonna start rabbinic training in January. I still feel like a beginner, and I think I always will. Actually, it's
Are you
interesting that way.
psyched to go back to school?
I am. I'm really psyched. I am. I think it's gonna be great to really just immerse deeply in learning, to get a more systemic Jewish education. As opposed to this kind of autodidact thing I've been doing, which, you know, it's a tougher way to learn.
Now, do you think you'll become a rabbi? I mean, will
I will
you?
not have a pulpit. I will definitely not have a pulpit. I want to keep writing books and speaking and teaching. Like that's really what I want to do. I don't want to have like a specific congregation.
Yeah, you don't want to lead committees and things like that.
Oh,
It's
it's very hard. Rabbis are
that'll
my
ruin the
heroes.
passion. That'll
Oh
ruin the
my
passion.
gosh,
Once you're leading
rabbis are
committees and
my.
things, you're done.
I got to tell you, rabbis, ministers, anyone who's in a position of religious leadership in a community, I am in awe of because that's a very hard job. Very hard.
Yeah, and you don't really know that you spend all this time studying Hebrew or Greek and Kierkegaard and Maimonides and all that stuff,
Right.
and then you go and they say, "Okay, we have a building committee meeting, and all right, we're gonna do it."
Exactly.
And what are we gonna do, Rabbi, about the plumbing? And you're like, "I don't." I'm here for
Or
it.
the political fight, like this
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
candidate, and
yeah.
now we're mad about that. I mean, I've just seen people being torn apart. I mean, it is hard. My heart goes out to them. It is hard.
You know, I would like to come back a little bit to when you're talking about modernity and Jew church and
Yeah.
Protestantism, but I think I do want to talk a little bit about anti-Semitism, right? Because I
Yeah.
mean, what else is there to talk about?
Hey, listen, man.
And what else is there?
I'm
Come
deep
on,
in. I'm deep in it. Let's
you're
do it.
deep
Bring it
in it.
on.
You're deep into it. Well, I mean, you talk about in the book, you talk a little bit about the essence of it,
Yeah.
power, depravity, and conspiracy that are at the heart of these things. But you started writing this book
Mm.
pre October 7th, and I
About a
mean,
year
this is
before October 7th, believe it or not.
yes.
Yeah.
So I'm imagining that the blaming, shaming, and trying to erase part of the title was not originally yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there's an October 7th flair.
There is, but actually it didn't change after October 7th. I mean, the content, some of the content changed, but the
Right.
idea
But
is
the
the
title
same,
was the
the
title, the
argument.
blaming and the shaming and erasing, that was
I didn't come up with a title until the very last minute, so
okay.
that was yeah, I didn't I was thinking of the title of, like, Jew Without Apology or Unapologetic Judaism or something like that, but yeah, that was the title. I mean, even before October 7th, I would've gone with that title, same title.
By the way, what do you think of the term Jewess? My friend Mark Oppenheimer does the Unorthodox podcast,
Yeah,
and
of
he
course.
he used to do it. I mean, now he does
Right.
another part, but, he's a good friend. He's been on the show a few times, but Mark, a couple years ago, wrote a piece, and I think he said on the podcast about he wanted to I don't know if he still does, but he wanted to reclaim the term Jewess.
I mean, I think it's been used as a derogatory term, but so has Jew,
Yeah,
which is really
yeah,
interesting to me.
absolutely.
It makes people uncomfortable when I say Jew. They're like, "Oh, a Jewish person, person of the Jewish
Right, right.
heritage." I'm like, "No, no, I'm actually a Jew. My title
Yeah,
is as
I'm
a
a Jew.
Jew." Right, really, as a Jew, like, not just a like, my identity for most of my life was totally apologetic. I'm just a cultural Jew. Oh, I'm not that Jewish. I'm a social justice Jew. It's like, I didn't know anything about Jewish culture. I didn't know anything about social justice. If I had, those would have been amazing ways to be a Jew, but, like, I knew nothing. But so why was I always, like, caveating it? And the answer, you just asked about it, is because of, 2,000 years of anti-Semitism and 250 years of Jews erasing ourselves to try to fit in, which we're wrestling with that legacy today. And I will tell you, we are so confused about anti-Semitism. Like, people really do not understand what it is, and I really didn't understand what it was until I started kind of engaging in this book, because we so often think of it as a personal prejudice, right? Jews are
Yeah,
gross,
right,
greedy, crass, personal
right.
prejudice. Yeah, that's still out there, but it is really a political conspiracy theory that says that Jews are the one thing standing in the way of the redemption of the world. They are that evil thing that stops the good thing. So, like, we're trying to Christianize the Roman Empire. What's stopping us? The Jews. We're trying to
The
bring about
Jews.
we're trying to bring about communism, the revolution, the brotherhood of man. Who's stopping us? Capitalist Jews. We're trying to bring about the great Aryan fatherland in Germany. Who's stopping us? Race polluting Jews. Today in America, on the right, we're trying to bring about white Christian civilization. Who is stopping us? These Jews importing black and brown immigrants. Great replacement conspiracy, bonkers Tucker Carlson. And on the left, it is we're trying to do social justice, anti-colonialism, anti-racism. Who is stopping us? These racist, colonialist Israelis.
Isn't
Zionists.
it wild though right now? I mean, I'm having a guy on who's actually tomorrow on he was a Turning Point board member, and I've had him
Oh,
on I had him on
interesting.
once before, yeah, I had him on right after the Charlie Kirk assassination. He's a very interesting guy.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about the conservative civil war a little bit tomorrow, what's going
Mm.
on, but
Conservative
isn't
Jews are having their October 8th moment right now. But
yeah,
yeah.
isn't it interesting how this is dovetailing with the anti-Israel stuff. It's starting to. I want to play those games. Where what text is this from? You did had to do one of your chaplaincy thing, like who said this?
Oh God.
Is it
I'll
Old
probably
Testament,
fail
New
this, but go
Testament?
ahead.
Right?
Oh yeah,
But
right.
I almost want to play this make this game where like you pull up a Tucker Carlson quote or a progressive activist in New York, and these are interchangeable right now about
It
Jews and
is
anti-Semitism. It's crazy.
it's completely crazy. And it's here's a living daylights had to make, because both of them have now arrived at, we're taking money away from good people here at home and giving it to fund those evil Israelis far away. Right. Which, like, look, whatever you think about funding for like that's not really the issue. Right. The issue is the Jews are hurting you. These big, powerful Jews are taking stuff away from you because they're powerful, depraved, and in a conspiracy to harm you. It's on the left. I think Mamdani has normalized that. It is on the right. Tucker Carlson, all of that. They are normalizing that. And I gotta tell you, in some number of years, not many, you're gonna have millions of unemployed college graduates. And I think that left wing Mamdani kind of blame the Jews and free stuff is going to be very appealing to them. And that worries me. And on the right, you see, you're going to have a lot of unemployed, angry young men who right now, who you look at the stats, young men are increasingly anti-Semitic. You're seeing this kind of like this Jews killed Jesus vibe on the right. You're seeing this Tucker Carlson just insane garbage. It's like, oh my God, it is the horseshoe has met. It is met. The ends have met. Like they are. You're right. It is. I mean, it's not a game, but it's like it's sort of a sick game of being like, okay, here's a quote. Is it from the right or the left? And I don't think you're going to be able to tell. And that is really sobering right now.
Yeah, and I mean, for our listeners, I'd recommend the book for so many reasons, but one of them is the history of anti-Semitic tropes and just the development of it. You do such a good job in a relatively concise space of giving somebody some tools to understand this and places to go with other thinkers, and it's just for any listener who's trying to make sense of the anti-Semitic moment. This book is for me. This is your book, right? I mean, it's right here, but
Mhm.
I was interacting with a friend recently, and we were talking about Israel, and he was making the case that that it's not anti-Semitic to have these certain views on Israel.
Yes.
What I was saying was that what I've learned from my anti-racist friends, my feminist friends, is that it's very easy. You could be a judge or something, and you could have very good personal relationships, for instance, with African Americans, and yet you might be making decisions in a courtroom that systemically affect blacks consistently, right?
Yeah.
That you could have personal affection for black friends and also be doing things that are undermining them systemically. And same thing, you might have daughters and female coworkers, and yet you could be perpetuating sexism. And so I said, don't you think? I mean, if part of the master story of the West is Christian supersessionism and anti-Judaism, why would we think that all of a sudden those lenses would just drop off when we make certain judgments about Israel? Like why? Because when you do a little bit of, and this was an educated guy, says that when you do a little educated work, begin to get trained in systemic effects of things.
Right.
Why is it that we are so sensitive to systemic effects around feminism or around
Mhm.
the way folks of color are discriminated against, but when it comes to Israel, we
Yeah.
just we just break it off. That's completely different, right? That's
Yeah.
completely different than personal relationship with Jews and systemic critiques of Israel. Is it I mean, is it naive to think that the anti-Semitic lenses just drop off when we start talking about
Yeah.
Israel in
They do.
ways I
I
never
mean,
hear any other country at war talked about?
this is the thing. I've gone to a lot of college campuses, and oftentimes the students who are being, harassed, ostracized, mistreated by their classmates, they say, well, okay, it's not anti-Semitism, it's really anti-Israel, it's a criticism of Israel. And I say, okay, amazing. Let's do an analogy. Let's just say that your classmates are very upset about the actions of the government of China. So mad. And they hold these noisy rallies where they say Chinese equal Nazis and we don't want no China lovers here. And they demand that every Chinese American student totally disavows China. You can't study abroad there. You can't learn Hebrew. If you say a single nice thing about Chinese history, culture, your family in China, you are a monster. And student clubs now have a no China lovers allowed policy. I mean, even saying that makes me horrified because
Yeah,
that's
right,
just
right. You
racism.
can't even
Right.
get it out.
I can't even get out. Like,
Yeah,
that's
it's
not
so offensive.
criticism of
Right,
the
right,
Chinese
right, right,
government.
right.
Likewise, if a bunch of white students on campus said, you know what, we really don't like BLM, we disagree with his policies and tactics, okay, fair enough. We can have that discussion. But once they start saying, well, BLMers, once they start holding rallies saying BLMers equals thugs, and we don't want no BLMers here, and black students, you have to disavow Black Lives Matter and you have to affirm that all lives matter, or else we won't allow you in our club. Are we really going to have a debate about whether that's just anti-BLM sentiment or anti-Black racism? I don't think we are. When the majority is telling the minority, we decide how you live out your identity. We decide who's a good Black person or a bad one. We decide who's a good Chinese American person or a bad one. And when they're saying to Jewish kids on campus, you're acceptable if you reject Israel, then you're a good Jew. If you won't reject Israel, then sorry, you're a bad Jew. Uh, I'm going to call that anti-Semitism, just like I call the Chinese American kids example racism, and just like I call the BLM example racism. Not hard. I don't think it's hard. You want to criticize Israel? Please do. I'll have that conversation. We can talk about policies and government, all that stuff. But like, I wish that was what was going on campus because that would be sane. It's not what's happening.
I mean, it's very interesting. Y- Scott Galloway was saying something about on Morning Joe. I think he was promoting a book or something, and he was saying that you know that the civilian to combatant casualty rate is lower than World War II, lower than Afghanistan, Iraq, Fallujah, all these. It's just it's I mean, Israel didn't drop a bomb on Nagasaki. I mean, this is if it wanted to genocide Gaza, it could have been done in 2 weeks, right? I mean, just
Right.
military, it just could have happened. But and I mean, I think one could argue. I've had a guy, Thane Rosenbaum, who has a book on just war in Gaza. I mean, you could argue that the IDF has been the most scrupulous military. Now, again, people die in war, and there are war criminals in everywhere. And in Israel, they go to jail. I mean, they're tried and they're prosecuted. But what's interesting is that when all of that, when I mean, all of our disproportionate carnage that we've done in modern warfare in this country, no one says we genocide anybody.
No, we don't. I mean, do you know how many you don't know how many people we killed in Iraq because no one does. The
Right,
lowest
right,
number I found is like, 225,000 in Iraq, Afghanistan. It's probably more like 600,000. I mean, I think one of the reasons for this is that we've now kind of are increasingly entering this post-literate society where you used to see really disturbing images, but with text. They were in a newspaper, so there was
right,
text
right,
explaining them,
right,
or it
right.
was on the evening news, so there was some context. Today, especially young people, TikTok bombards their brains all day long with absolutely upsetting carnage, right? It causes me anguish. It's awful.
Of
No human
course, of
being
course.
can look at war, no matter who the parties are, without being horrified. But if you now try to have a conversation with someone whose brain has been bombarded by horrifying carnage all day long, they can't hear you. Right? Like I can make all the arguments about civilian casualties and that, but I'm doing it through a wall of dead people. I'm doing it through a wall of carnage. And so whatever I say sounds obscene. So we can't have a rational conversation. I mean, all of the things you're saying are rational arguments. They're based in data and facts and
Right.
history and numbers. But if you live online like most people do, you live in an eternal, ahistorical, decontextualized present. So you see carnage, carnage, carnage. Okay, Jews are bad. There's no okay, wait, there's no history, there's no who started it, there's nothing else. And that is a really dangerous place for Jews and for a society in general.
Do you feel like some of this is also there's something about in a Christian supersessionist or a Gentile hegemonic world, w- there's something okay with the image of Israel defending itself. Okay, okay, okay. Maybe they push them out. Okay, October 7th, maybe for a day or something. But there's just not. We're not comfortable with Jews waging war the way Christians and Gentiles and superpowers. No, 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 no. We cannot have Jews acting like goyim on the stage, right? Is it that crass? Is that too crass?
I do think that's part of it. And there actually is, it's sort of funny, there actually is what's called now Holocaust inversion, by which it's like, okay, now the Jews are the new Nazis and the Palestinians are the new
Right,
Jews.
right, right, right.
And what scares me is I'm like, oh my God, I do wonder if this is some of the fallout of using Holocaust education as anti-Semitism education. Because when you're taught big, mean Nazis killed skinny, little, weak Jews, you think like, oh, this is like racism, where like big, powerful white people hurt really vulnerable black people. Okay, now I look and I see Israel on my TikTok. I'm seeing Israel, big, powerful Israelis hurting weak, emaciated Palestinians. So the lesson of the Holocaust is being anti-Zionist, right? But that's not what the Germans were saying about the Jews. What the Germans were saying about the Jews was these powerful Jews have caused us to lose World War One. They've caused our economy to fail in depression. They're literally undermining our society. They are threatening. They're dangerous. We're actually punching up against this powerful, threatening, kind of like, again, powerful, depraved, and a conspiracy. We're punching up. We're actually self-defending. This is self-defense, what we're doing. Jews were not portrayed as weak or skinny or powerless. So sorry, my
That's all right.
turn this off. I don't know. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you say something in the book towards the end of the book that I you're talking about the tunnels, and you say these tunnels are an extraordinary achievement. An estimated 350 to 450 miles long with nearly 5,700 shafts. Some of them have bathrooms and kitchens and ventilation systems and phone lines, electricity, and even air conditioning. They're deliberately constructed in homes and schools and hospitals and UN offices whose occupants are used as human shields. The sole function of the tunnels is to shelter terrorists for the purpose of attacking Israel. Those who die in the cause, including innocent civilians, are celebrated as martyrs. And you have this sentence. I must have read the sentence a dozen times because it was so, it just burned in my brain. It's almost like a photo negative of Zionism.
Mm.
So many years, resources, and lives sacrificed to fight the existence of another state rather than building their own. Such a depressing waste of human talent, ambition, and potential. And I, I was overwhelmed with sadness when I read that
Me too.
because despite your clear Zionism and your pride as a Jew, your the compassion
Yeah.
with which you write about the Palestinians and even the folks who in Gaza, who even people under these tunnels. I mean, you see the human tragedy in it all. And how were you able to conjure up that empathy? Is that natural in you? Is that, I mean, how were you feeling when you wrote stuff like that?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I think that what I sometimes see on the left is a kind of left-wing white supremacy where they're sort of looking at people who are considered brown and holding them to very low standards, saying, it is actually a form of white supremacy, saying like, oh, Hamas, look, all they can do is terrorism because they're the oppressed, they are brown. Like,
Right.
I will not do that, right? These are human beings. They have incredible intellectual capacity and agency. They have moral agency. They've made strategic decisions over many decades with a really clear strategy, right? Like there is an idea that I think that they have for many decades seen Israel as a colonial entity. And you know what? A strategy of relentless wars and terrorist attacks against colonizers, it's an understandable strategy because colonizers have the whole empire to return to. And if you just keep slaughtering them, they're going to go back home. If they don't want to
Right,
sit
right,
around to be
right, right,
slaughtered in a
right,
colony,
right,
problem is Jews have no home empire or home state.
right.
Israel's their home. They have nowhere to go. So this strategy, it's a mistaken strategy. And I see this deliberate mistaken strategy over decades. I see people making these choices deliberately. Hamas, when it, basically waged a coup, took over Gaza, it could have taken hundreds of millions of dollars in aid and built schools, hospitals, businesses. It could have really built a society, but they, as human beings, made a decision to build hundreds of miles of tunnels and spend their money on those and on rockets and on attacking Israel. That's a choice, right? I'm not going to demean them. I'm not going to condescend to them. I'm not going to disrespect them or treat them as less than fully intelligent human beings with agency. They made a choice. And so and that's where I see the tragedy. These were choices people made. And I don't think Israel's perfect. Israel comes in for plenty of criticism in my book because I too
Yeah,
hold them
yeah, yeah,
to equal
yeah.
standards, right? I'm going to criticize the hell out of both of these. When I see something when I see a bad decision, I'm going to criticize it. And I just see a bad strategy and a bad series of decisions that have led to real human tragedy and devastation. And it just breaks my heart because there are so many Palestinians who just want to build lives. They want to have good lives for their kids. They want to build businesses. They're ambitious and smart and decent. And to have leaders like Hamas, to have these horrors being visited on them, it's heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, I often think about like books like Huntington's Clash of Civilizations that goes in and out of vogue, but e when I think about the world, all conflict there are two kinds of nations in the world, right? There are liberal nations and illiberal nations, right? They're roughly, I mean, they're nations in this liberal tradition that are constitutional republics where the individual is sovereign, and there's this Enlightenment tradition where you write about in the books quite well about how Judaism interacted with this and in modernity. And we have this Enlightenment tradition, and it's democratic and again Republican and stuff. And then you have illiberal nations, right, that tend to be just illiberal, where they're not the same conception of human rights or democratic norms and things like this. And it's funny because all conflicts in the world are between either two illiberal nations and a liberal and an illiberal nation. There are no liberal sides that go to war, right? When England and France had that dust up a couple of years ago about the English Channel rights on the boats, no one thought England and France were going to go. We're not going to go to war with Mexico. There's just not. But it's very like Huntington thinks that the clashes happen on the border states, right? The civilizational border states,
Mm.
and that is so tough, isn't it? Because I mean, Israel is part of one tradition, a liberal tradition, and its adversary in this conflict with Hamas and the Palestinians, that's an illiberal tradition. I mean, there's not the same kind of perspective on gay rights or religious freedom or that we would expect in the US or Canada or France or Germany or Denmark or something, right? Or Japan.
Oh,
I mean, what do you do? How do you make peace when there's this fundamental orientation that seems to be in tension?
yeah, it's very hard. And I think, one thing you don't do is become like that in liberal tradition. And I see it both in the US and in Israel,
Mhm,
where
mhm.
there is an encroaching of liberalism in both of our countries. And
Yes.
that really worries me. Like, you have to really stand by those liberal values, and you gotta defend yourself. And you defend yourself through the lens of those liberal values. And that doesn't mean lying down and letting people kill you. You have to wage just wars. You have to fight for your security. I have no problem with that. But seeing in both the US and Israel this kind of like sliding extremism, this sliding, encroachment on democracies, I worry. Like, I actually worry we're taking on some of the characteristics of these illiberal nations, and like, how long will we be able to kind of stand the course of democracy? How long will we be able to stay liberal? It worries me. And I think social media is one of the biggest drivers of this. I really do. I think it is just breaking our brain. I think it's corroding our souls. I think it is, I really think it's one of the worst things. And I think that, look, our adversaries are doing this to us, right? Like, we are being absolutely controlled by foreign countries that want to divide us, that want to split us up. I mean, what is TikTok doing? These are real serious threats that we're facing right now. It's not good for us on many levels: political, spiritual, moral. It's not great.
Is that the fundamental conflict in society right now? Is it not, I mean, liberal is it not Democrat or Republican, not left, right, but liberal, illiberal? I mean, I think
Yeah,
I've had
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
100%. I mean, look, I'm still a Democrat. I have many friends who are Republicans, and I've often thought, like, I could have a White House with these never Trump Republicans. We would fight it out.
sure,
We
sure,
disagree.
sure,
Like,
sure.
we
You might not
disagree on
agree on
policy.
welfare programs or something, but you
Exactly. We disagree on policy, but we agree
right.
on democracy. And that's like, I would love just like a coalition of sane normies. That's like
Yeah.
what I want. Like, I think we almost have to like rearrange the party. So just like the sane normies who believe in rule of law and democracy and fair procedures, duke it out. And we're not going to agree. We're going to we will figure this out. And then, like, they're just extremists on both sides who are illiberal and just wild. They can
Yeah.
just go and tear each other apart. But I think it is, I totally agree with you. I think it really is liberal versus illiberal. I don't think it's left, right, Democrat, Republican anymore. I don't even know what those terms mean anymore, frankly, at this point.
'Cause that is who I feel the kinship with, like, I've had David French on this podcast a few times,
Yeah,
and
sure.
he and I are so different politically, and yet this guy I'm having on tomorrow, Bryce Eddie, I mean, we're both classical liberals. Now, we politically are in such different places, and yet
Totally.
this sort of but when I hear people use these terms, like, on my own side of the aisle, I'm on the left. There's this term, free speech absolutism. We're not free speech absolute. I thought free speech was a good thing. Like, these but isn't that it's very interesting, and
Yeah.
that you see this, you see these censorious people on the left, and then I have these people that friends I know that I voted for Trump because he's for free speech. I'm like, well, he's calling for ABC to cancel to cancel late
It's
night hosts.
so maddening to me. Like, I see exactly. I mean, I look at people like Brett Stevens, and I don't agree with him on everything, but I feel such a kinship with him because
Sure.
even though we disagree on a lot of policies,
Yeah.
there is like, I know exactly what you mean. I'm on the left too, but I do feel this kinship with these folks, and I think it's hard. It's hard to see people on both sides just taking such an extreme, and I think increasingly dangerous path.
Yeah, you say in the book that you talk. One of my favorite sections in the book is when you're talking about modernity and the
Mm.
sort of attempt to grapple with the Enlightenment tradition. And you say, look, I'm an Enlightenment Jew. I don't, I don't take the Torah literally. I don't, I don't know. I take historical criticism. We don't. I don't think we know if all these people were historical characters and all this sort of stuff. You say without the reformers' efforts, Jews would have been forced to choose between Jewishness and modernity. I'm guessing most would have gone with the latter, becoming Christians or abandoning Judaism altogether. Besides, Jewish tradition has never been hermetically sealed from. It's always drawn from, enriched from cultures around it. That I loved those words, but I always I wonder about these words that a professor of mine in college said to me years ago. He said, he was a class, the particular class he was talking about fundamentalists. And he
Oh,
said, the lessons fundamentalists will tell you. Here's the lesson that they have to teach you. Modernity will nickel and dime you to death, right? That it tell you know that it tells you you can't believe in this anymore. Of course, you can't believe. You can't believe in miracles. You can't believe in that. You can't believe. We're modern people. The Jeffersonian Bible, right, where he goes through the Bible and takes out all the miracles and distills it to the
right.
just the ethical teachings. And how do you in your own life? How do you embrace eat the fish and spit out the bones? Like
Mhm.
how do you embrace the best of the Enlightenment and
Yes.
yet not be plagued by skepticism and still have an appreciation for mystery? Even if you don't take all the miracles literally, how do you still have a faith that's shot through with mystery?
I love this, and I have this dream of going back to, like, the early 1800s, where it's like, "Okay, we're in modernity, we'll get into modernity here, we're believing in science, we're rejecting superstition, we're not taking sacred text literally." And in that moment, I have this dream that, like, Jews could sit around and instead of being soaked in, like, the antisemitism and so Christian anti-Judaism that they were soaked in, that really made them look at their traditions with shame, they can instead take this modern lens and go back through centuries worth of text and say, like, "Okay, this thing that says that, this potion will cure illnesses, whatever, like, this is sort of nonsense," or "We don't take this stuff literally, but wow, is there wisdom here?" Like, do I literally believe that the stuff in the Torah happened? No, but I also don't literally believe that there was literally a boy who cried wolf. But, like, that story is powerful,
Yeah,
right? That
yeah.
story is true in some fundamental way, and
It's
this
so it's
idea
so it's so it's so true. It didn't need to have happened.
that's a thing, right? Like, and this idea of a story about a god and human beings in partnership together to build a society the exact opposite of Egypt, whether or not there is historicity to that, it's a really powerful sacred story that has been sanctified by my ancestors who over centuries and centuries have tried to live that story, have told that story, have passed it on. So to me, there's just this profound wisdom. This is my family story. Like, I think I can kind of I can, seriously, but not literally, not to use the old Donald Trump thing, but like, I can take it seriously, but not literally. I can take the sacred truth, the moral truth without necessarily the literal truth. And that's kind of what Judaism has always done. You see this for centuries, Jews kind of reinterpreting their traditions as the times evolve, as they became to understand science more effectively. When you look at Maimonides, one of the greatest Jewish thinkers, the guy was a doctor. He wrote a book of logic. He was a scientist. We don't think of those things as in intention. You can actually have both of those things, and you need them both.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Maimonides because didn't this week I was talking to an Orthodox rabbi friend of mine who's actually he's so psyched to hear this interview. He loves your work and he's a close friend of mine. And he was telling me today about I didn't realize that I saw something about it, but I didn't follow it. That Dershowitz had come out this week. Do you know? And
No,
basically
I don't
said
know this.
Maimonides was kind of he was an arrogant fool or something.
Yikes!
Apparently, like Dershowitz came out and he just my buddy was like, you just don't.
Not
Nobody's
wow. I would
nobody's
never call
perfect.
Maimonides a. I don't know if he was arrogant or not. I would not call him a fool. That I would not do.
Well, and he's one of these figures, right? That it's very interesting. He and Thomas Aquinas are sort of contemporaries. Around that same century. And it's just so interesting. These people that had they not dealt with this Aristotelian reemergence
Yes.
in the West, and it the traditions might have capsized, right? I mean, because the reemergence of Aristotle just brought all these questions that the medieval synthesis just wasn't adequate to anymore. And so, I
Um,
mean, sometimes it's these. I think traditions that don't evolve are dead. I mean, they die. There's a reason
they
why
can.
people are still at satyrs or people are still at cathedrals and they're not worshiping Zeus anymore, because
Yes.
or
They
Thor. I mean,
evolved.
those
They
traditions
evolved.
stopped evolving
That
and
exactly.
stopped meeting and being able to name and expand and meet the ongoing cultural challenges, right?
And this is when you look at like Jewish tradition, it's always shaped by the people around us. Maimonides was, he was very engaged with Muslim philosophers who were engaged with Greek philosophers, right? These
Yeah.
these influences were coming in and they weren't, it wasn't a wholesale just embrace of them. It was oh, hey, this presents some challenges. Let me shore up my tradition. Let me actually embrace some things that actually help enhance the tradition, not hermetically sealed. Right. And thank God, because if they were, I don't think they would exist. I don't think Judaism would exist anymore. And ditto for Christianity and Islam and these old traditions that have survived for so many centuries.
My favorite theologian, Karl Barth, said that, now I don't actually know if he said this. I mean, there's debate whether this is apocryphal or not, but it's ish. It's Barth-ish. He said that the pastor needs to have the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other.
Mm.
And there's something about him thinking that you can't just put your head in the sand, that there has to be the faith has to be relevant. It's got to look into the world you live in. It can't just birds. I mean, you've been so engaged your whole life. I mean, you've worked with the leader of the free world. I mean, how does the Torah, the Talmud, the newspaper, how does the Parsha and CNN, how does all this integrate with you? I mean, do you get up and study Talmud first, or is it CNN? I mean, how does this all work out
You
for you?
know, it's kind of both throughout the day, right? It's
Yeah.
like I'm studying a Jewish text and then I'm checking the New York Times and I'm doing this. And, I take the wisdom of Jewish text and I apply it to the world around me. I look at our modern social media discourse and it's just like, here is my one truth and I'm going to scream it so loud and call everyone who disagrees with me evil. End of story. That is so un-Jewish. Like Jewish tradition, all we do for centuries is wrestle with opposing truth. It's just like, look at the Torah, right? We're like, love the stranger, love the non-Jew, welcome the stranger. Oh, and also remember Amalek. Remember the tribe of the Amalekites who attacked the Israelites from behind when they were weak, and never forget them. So it's like, love the stranger, but remember that some strangers want to kill you. Be open-hearted, but don't be naive. You have
Yeah.
to hold both opposing truths, right? We're told there's like an old Hasidic saying that says you have to have two pieces of paper in your pocket. One says the world was created for me. Wow, self-esteem, pride. The other says, I am but dust and ashes, humility. You got to hold them both. If you're holding just one, you're doing it wrong. And so, like, I think about just that very Jewish understanding that we have to hold multiple opposing truths and actually wrestle with the truth in each of them. We're not doing that today. And so it's like that kind of Jewish wisdom I carry with me. Even the wisdom about how to use your speech. Like, what do you put out in the world from your mouth? It's like not you know, there's a very haunting old Jewish story that totally like stays with me about this guy who went around his shtetl just trashing his rabbi, just saying all these mean things. Then he felt guilty. So he went to the rabbi. He said, I trashed you. I'm so sorry. Will you forgive me? And the rabbi said, sure, but first you have to take this feather pillow, cut it open, and scatter the feathers to the wind. And the guy's like, weird, but okay. So he does it. He comes back. He says, I did it. Am I forgiven? And the rabbi said, sure, but first you have to go gather up all those feathers. And like that is like when you trash someone, right? If I go around and I tell a bunch of people, oh, I met this guy, Scott, he's the worst. I don't like him. I trash you. I don't know. And then maybe I meet you again and I realize, well, that wasn't fair. He's a lovely guy. I just had a weird impression of him. Problem is, I just told a bunch of people about you, and maybe those people told people, and
Right.
maybe you apply for a job at someone's company, and it's one of those people, and they're like, oh no, I heard from Sarah that Scott guy is sketchy. No way. Can't get the feathers back.
I
This is
it's
Jewish wisdom.
funny. I remember that from your first book. I think we actually even talked about it last time we
Did we
had
talk
a talk.
about it last
I
time? I mean,
think we
that
did.
story continues to
I
haunt
love
me,
that story.
right? How many of us have done that? It's like so deep. It's so deep.
I love that when you said the two truths have to be true, and you talk about this, how this is part of your love of Jewish tradition, that the arguments, the dialectical tensions, the truth is in the dialectic, right? It's in my friend Uri, who I mentioned before, one of my rabbi friends.
Mm.
He said something to me recently from Yossi Klein Halevi about
Love you, see.
the Pesach and the Purim Jew, right? The Pesach
Hmm.
Jew, who is the
Yeah,
welcome the stranger, and the Purim view the Purim Jew with the first note is not welcome the stranger, but vigilance for our safety. And I love how you said you have
yeah.
to do, but like these are
You do
both
both.
essentially Jewish, right? I mean, they're both. It's
Absolutely.
not 50-50. It's 100-100.
Yes, exactly. That's a perfect way to put it. Right? You have to fully embrace both of these truths and you have to wrestle with them. And it doesn't mean you'll come out exactly in the middle, but you better come out somewhere between them. Because if you're just clinging to one, you're doing it wrong. You really are.
I love something you said early in the book where you tell the story of the four children, the tradition of the four children at Seder, the wise, the wicked, the simple, and how they have the different reactions. And you say there's the silent child, and you, for most of your life, were the silent child with regard to faith. Ironically, a speechwriter
I know,
who
right?
had the pediatric faith of the silent child. What's it like to now? I mean, I imagine it's like a miracle story, right? Where the prophet heals a mute person. I mean, what is it like to be the silent child who now speaks?
I mean, it's amazing, right? Like the silent child is the one who doesn't even know how to ask. But I didn't even know that there was anything to ask about. What would I didn't know. I knew 4 holidays
Yeah.
and 3 universal values. So, like, to actually know that, oh my god, there's this massive, profound tradition that I can ask so many questions about. So I feel both so grateful and so inspired and also angry. I feel
Mm,
angry about
mm,
the centuries of persecution that really forced Jews to leave that behind, right? To
mm,
erase that. So to leave it behind, to try to be safe and accepted and fit in. I'm so resentful of our persecutors. I'm not resentful of my ancestors at all. I have such compassion and gratitude for them. That they were just trying to stay safe. They were trying to have the opportunities that I take for granted. So for them, I have just love and gratitude and respect. But for our persecutors, to make us do that, right? To say you have to be like us, you have to leave yourself behind. I feel a lot of anger. I feel anger that so
mm.
many Jews for so many generations have been deprived of our own traditions. And so, so much of my work, my career is just trying to give that back, trying to give it back to Jews, but also to anyone curious about Jewish tradition. I'm curious about other traditions and I've loved learning about them. And I want to give that to people of different traditions as well.
I so love. I mean, I know you say you were the silent child, you know, your whole life. You said that in the book, like you of so much of your life. And I so benefit from the breaking of your silence in matters of Judaism and spirituality and history. I'm so thrilled to have read your work and to know you a little bit. So thank you so much for writing as a Jew, reclaiming our story from those who blame, shame, and try to erase us. Anybody listening, buy this book. Buy it for your friends. You don't need to be Jewish to love it. I'm not Jewish, and I learned so much from reading it. Thank you so much for writing it and for spending some time talking with me about
Oh,
it.
gosh. Such a pleasure, Scott. I really thank you so much for having me.
It's pleasure was all mine.